Okay. So first of all, I wanted to thank everybody for coming today to After Hours Conversations on Art and Culture. We are so happy to have Vernita Nemec here today. I've known her for a few years now, and she's just a fabulous person, and I'm so happy that she agreed to do this and also have an exhibition in the gallery, the main gallery. So I wanted to introduce her first, and then we'll get going with the interview. So Vernita Nemec, also known by the performance name Vernita N'Cognita, is a visual and performance artist, curator, and arts activist based in New York City. She was born in Painesville, Ohio, earned her BFA from Ohio University in 1964, and has resided in New York City since 1965. She is also known for her soft stuff sculpture, collages, artists' books, photographs, and installations. Nemec has been active in the art world since the late 1960s when she co-curated X12, the first feminist art show of the period, and worked with such political art organizations as Art Workers Coalition, Women Artists Revolution, and Artists Meeting for Cultural Change. In the 90s, Nemec served as director of Artist Talk on Art, interviewing many art world luminaries and as independent curator at the Henry Street Settlement for the Arts. For the past decade, Nemec has been organizing and independently curating exhibitions of art made from recycled materials called Art from Detritus. She is currently director of Viridian Artists, a contemporary art gallery in New York City's Chelsea district. So please help me in welcoming Vernita Nemec.
I just want to add, though, that actually the Art from Detritus shows started almost over 20 years ago, because I had gone to a National Recycling Coalition conference, and I looked around and they had this table of children's art, and that was to be examples of recycling with art. And I said, wait a minute, could I do a show with you? And so they said, well, let's see what you come up with. So the following year, it was in Washington State. I can't remember what city, but anyways, I did it with the recycling department of that city government. So anyway, wow. 1994.
Wow, around a long time. So that's wonderful, and I think it's so timely now, especially.
Exactly.
Yeah, with things that are going on, and even like today, things that are happening today. So, and we, this is something that is important to our community as well. And so we've had a lot of artists that are interested in upcycling and recycling. So we are really happy that, again, that you wanted to come to talk and then also exhibit your work. All right, so let's go back to the beginning. Are you ready?
Oh, okay, if I can remember.
Okay. So you graduated from Ohio University in 1964. You moved to New York City in 65 and were politically active by 69. That's quite a timetable there. Would you talk about how you initially became involved with activism?
Well, I think I got rumors of meetings that were happening with artists. And since I didn't know any New York artists, really, I started to go to the meetings. And it was like a heavy time of unrest. And the feminist movement was just beginning then. The Vietnam War was going on. And so there were a lot of things to do.
Great. And so from there, you jumped right in, it seems, because you got involved with a lot of these organizations. So for instance, the Women Arts Revolution, which is WAR, was one of the first organizations you were associated with. So could you share an anecdote from your time working alongside artists and writers such as Nancy Spiro, Leon Golub, Lucy Lippard? I mean, these are, big names. Yeah.
It was very trippy. And first of all, WAR came out of a group called Art Workers Coalition. And we did a lot of really critically important things at the time. I don't know if you remember, but there was a poster of the Vietnam War where all these women and babies were along this road and they'd been killed by American soldiers. That came out of our meetings. And it was called And Babies, and babies at the top and at the bottom of the picture. We did other exciting things too. One time we laid in front of on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum, and I think that was for women artists or underknown artists. We had manifestos that we wrote and presented to the Modern. And that was where I met Nancy Spiro, who was an incredible, generous woman. She and her husband, they were still relatively unknown. They were making heavily political art, both of them. And it wasn't until their 60s that they got any recognition at all. But she always, whenever I was organizing a show, she'd always put a piece in saying, you just got to get your work out there as much as possible, and that was her theory. Carl Andre was there, Leon was there, Lucy organized so many things for not only women artists, but she also loved minimal art. And she's way out in the Southwest now, but she's still cooking.
Well, she wrote so many wonderful articles too. I have several of her articles or collections of writings from her on feminism and the feminist movement. So I think she's still. Anytime I have a student that is interested in that direction in their art, I right
That's
away,
right.
yeah. Direct toward her.
She's probably one of the most important writers about those things in that period. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that first wave for sure.
Another thing that I was just going to add, I don't know if this is the point at which to say it, but another thing that came out of WAR and Art Workers Coalition was a group that we called Artists Meeting for Cultural Change and Museum, a Project for Living Artists. So there are all these little subgroups. And one day, a friend and I, she was also an artist, we stood up and we said, okay, the first 10 women who respond, who raise their hands, can be in our show called X12. And it was to be all women artists. And it was going to be, we said, you're going to have to, be upfront about being a female artist and being a feminist. And so that was what we felt was like the first feminist art show of that time period. There were others earlier in history, but of the 70s, we were the first.
Did you have any, this is kind of a sidebar, but when you were, especially your public pieces that you were doing, laying on the steps of the Met and so on, what was the reaction from male artists? Were they supportive, or did they try to encourage you, or how was that dynamic?
In that group, they were all supportive, because they were all very political. It was these were all people who cared about what was going on and what was unfair and what was going on and making their art have meaning in the rest of the world. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I know that we talk sometimes about certain groups like, the abstract expressionists, for instance, which was really heavy male presence. Yeah. And so that was a little earlier than this, but it's always encouraging, to know that we're not as segmented as we might believe. You can reach out, and there are people there that from all walks of life that are willing to support you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great. Let's see. So you were involved in the feminist movement of the 70s, obviously, both through your art and as a writer for women art. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your writing too, because that's hugely important. So, all of this experience and all this activism that you were involved with, how then, like when you're reflecting back on maybe how has the art world changed in terms of recognition of women arts or artists since the 70s? Do you see forward movement, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, so.
Well, there has been some forward movement, but there are still problems. I mean, sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, we also got together a group called Ad Hoc, and Lucy was one of the prime movers of that. And what we discovered was that the young female artists and feminist artists saw no problem they had already forgotten the battles for some reason. I mean, not that they were showing so much, but perhaps the women who came to us were both politically active and able to get into galleries, so that they didn't feel that need so greatly. And it wasn't until like 85 with the Guerrilla Girls that then it really brought it out into public awareness. And I was just looking them up in preparation for our talk on Wikipedia. And one of the things I didn't realize, you know, they were very funny. They were dressed in gorilla costumes. They were anonymous because it was so, I mean, the art industry is the ego industry as far as I'm concerned. And so they decided to be totally anonymous. And they also decided, since we didn't make much of a difference for women, that they were going to try to use humor to get the message out. And I think that helped to a great degree. I mean, they go all over the place now, and they're still active.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of bring that up too, because a lot of people think, you know, when you're looking at a history of art and you're saying, oh, the Guerrilla Girls, they were in the 80s, but no, and you know, they inspired other groups like Pussy Riot, for instance, and
Right.
other women's groups. These, you know, the same kind of idea. So they're still around, they're still active, which is heartening, I think.
And but sad that they still have to.
Well, it's true. And, you know, as you were talking about, you know, the younger women that came to you, I was just thinking about my students. I have a lot of female students that are very interested in, you know, talking about women's issues and, you know, expressing that in their art. But this is in an academic setting. So there's kind of a safety net in there
Right.
where you can explore. And we'll address this later about in terms of advice to these students, but I see that a lot of students, female students, are really, you know, interested in talking about these things, and they're very much more, I don't know, open, I think, you know, because nothing's taboo now, it seems, you know, talking
Right.
about menstrual cycles or, you know, abortion or, you know, rape and all of these issues and so on. They used to be very, you know, very shocking, and they still are shocking. Obviously, and violence is shocking, but they seem to be able to navigate, you know, those issues, I think, in their artwork, which I find really refreshing and encouraging.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Let's see. So as we have discussed, your activism has focused on a variety of themes, such as underrepresentation of artists, economic and political reforms in the art world, and environmental issues, to name a few. Of the causes you have been involved with, in which did you encounter the most challenges?
You know, I really think it's still about being a female artist. And also, because of my age, I've started to explore aging, because I feel that's still another issue too, that our culture doesn't really deal with in a way that gives us credit for still being able to do all that we do. And so those are the things that occupy me the most right now. And, you know, still things are happening, like the Baltimore Museum last year. They were looking for women artists, you know.
Right.
I don't know how many people they took on, or how successful that search was for the women artists, but at least it was an outward attempt. And I think there were other museums that did that as well. So it's still a big problem. And it also, now we also put it together with discrimination against artists of color. And, you know, the New York art world dominates the whole planet. And
Yeah, so what they say kind of sets a precedent for, you know, what's happening.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just saw an article about how this is kind of encouraging, that at auction, older female artists are dominating the auction block,
Wow.
whereas it used to be the young males, right? Remember the young British artists and, you know, that whole group of people. There's this kind of flip now, at least at auction, which is another cool thing. But, you know, that these older women artists are actually kind of getting better prices because, historically, well, women get less for their art than men.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
think it's about a third of what men get is the statistical figure. It's interesting that you say that too, because on Netflix, they've just started a program with Fran Lebowitz called Pretend This Is a City, Pretend It's a City. And
Yes,
at
saw
one
that,
point,
yeah.
she talks about going to an art auction and how they put a Picasso up on the wall ready to be auctioned off, and there's not a sound. The room is silent. And then everybody bids, and then finally they say, okay, 40,000 million, whatever it was. And then everyone claps for the money. They're clapping for the money. They're not clapping for the art.
Oh, no, not at all. Yeah, it is. It's a big contest.
Yeah.
I remember, I don't know if you watched the Sotheby's auction of the Salvator Mundi, the Leonardo piece. Oh my gosh, I was obsessed with this because it was just so unheard of, the price that it drew. Yeah, I mean, and it was all about the money and how how crazy the amount of money was. Think about this is the 1% of 1% of people.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. That's the whole auction thing. That's a whole nother conversation. Art is commodity, right?
Yes.
Okay, we're zooming it up to, we're in 1975 now. Okay. In our time machine. So in 75, you became an artist/member of Soho 20, which was one of the first galleries in Manhattan to show work of all female members. Would you talk about how your experiences there informed your later career?
That's an interesting question too, because I was so thrilled that they saw my work. And I had a solo show of some of my stuffed sculpture in Soho at a gallery called Razor. And the group got together and they invited me to join Soho 20 in 75. And I was probably what they call the second wave of women to be in the gallery. Because right now there's actually a historian at Rowan University who is trying to do a whole monograph about all the early Soho 20 artists. And when I came there, your expectations are always different than the reality. And what I learned was that, first of all, you could still have to keep doing it for yourself. You can't just make the art. You can't expect someone else, even if you have a gallery, even if there is a director or a committee, to do the PR, to do the, PR and the selling. Those are the primary things you're wishing for. Right. You have to do it yourself, really. You have to tell your friends and your, friends of friends, and you have to try to get the PR out. Those were the two main things that I got out of that experience. And it's so crazy. I have to share that at that time it was $25 a month. We had this little spot at 99 Spring Street, a second floor gallery, and we must have paid next to nothing for rent, and then we did all the work ourselves. We had committees. It was quite something, but there were, of course, some people who took advantage of the situation and, never really did anything. And then there were others who, sought out other places to show, to take the group or to take a small group, to try to figure out critics who would be interested in us. And Ellen Lubell, I have to say, she was at Arts Magazine at that time, was incredible. She was so supportive and would constantly see our shows and try to figure out ways to mention us.
I can't imagine Soho in the 70s, because Soho is so different now.
Oh, it's unbelievable. It's transformed.
There's nothing like, when I first moved to New York, Soho was already, the whole shift from Soho to Chelsea was pretty much at the end. And so that whole, I missed out on that kind of
Right.
grittiness of what Soho had been in
Oh,
the past.
and when I moved there, I mean, you went out to the art bars at night, but you walked very carefully and you went down the middle of the street, you know? You didn't walk next to the building. And a couple of my friends one of them was knifed one night. He survived, fortunately. But it was a dangerous place, but rents were very cheap.
Oh yeah.
And
Now the worst would you'll get a cappuccino thrown in your face.
exactly. Yeah, and the cafe is right downstairs.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're paying $10,000 a month.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My husband and I used to say when we would walk in Soho, you could tell how expensive the merchandise is in the shop by how much negative space there is.
They only have 3 things that they're selling.
Yeah, I can't afford it. That's it.
There's also this very trippy store that's been there for years. I don't know how they survive. And it's like all clothes made from the insides of old clothes. And it's so expensive, you know, like $1,000 for the lining of an old pea jacket.
Oh man, wow.
But they're wild, you know. I mean, every once in a while I'll see something there and I wish I could have it.
Uber vintage.
Right.
Oh boy. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about your pseudonym, because I think that's really interesting, and I think it's something that is maybe part of your aesthetic now too. So you adopted the pseudonym Incognita as a way to honor unrecognized artists. Would you talk about this name change and how your work at Viridian Gallery plays into this idea?
Well, first of all, you know, as a gallery director, I'm Vernita Nemec, but the essence of my work there is a deep sense that these artists all deserve recognition much more than they get. And it's so hard. It's so hard. And I think they're all underknown. I mean, and I guess when when new people are applying to be part of the gallery, we try to, I try to make it always be just the art that it's based upon. You know, we have these juried shows that people enter. I don't want to see anyone's bio. I don't even want to see their name, you know. And we usually have a museum curator come to jury, which helps, people are very excited maybe that Christy Isles will see their work.
Right.
But, I came to we would have like 500 people apply. Only 30 would get into the show. So I started this series called The Director's Choice, and I'd do a second show of my choices. And it was always also interesting to compare and to point out to the artists that curating to a large extent is a matter of one person's taste.
Right.
It's not what's the best. This is what just this person really likes.
True. That's true. And I find that very difficult to curate a show.
Yeah.
Because all these emotions come into play where you're trying to, especially with the mission that you're on and to represent these artists. It's like, well, you want to make sure that you're giving people a chance that may not have ever been in a gallery exhibition before. So, yeah, it's really difficult.
But a wonderful thing happens. A number of people who have won in those jury shows have become Viridian artists. So we're really pleased and proud of that and proud for them. So it feels like the battle goes on, and winning it is still, it's still a struggle, but you've got to keep working at it.
Yeah.
And never give up.
Well, I give you a lot of credit because it's exhausting, really.
Yes.
And, going back to what you said earlier about PR, as somebody that is so passionate about, representing these people, you're taking on a lot of that yourself. I mean, I get your calls, I get all of your PR all the time, and I'm always impressed by how you're always on it. You guys are just like push, 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 and I really admire that.
Thank you. We do work hard.
Yeah, you most definitely do. So back to Viridian again. So as the director of Viridian Artists, can you talk about the challenges facing you and the gallery during the COVID pandemic? What have you learned as a director that enabled you to continue exhibiting artists?
Well, first of all, we were hanging a show for Her Story that I called Her Story last March on the 17th. And we hung the show. I have a committee of 4, and we went home, and that was when it all began. Everything shut down. That was the last day the gallery was open until I think last month we had one show on the premises because it was our young artist program, and we just felt it was really critical to do it, and they were okay about it. But I mean, what I'm learning is, first of all, that it's becoming much more digital. We invested in this 3D gallery program. I don't know if you've seen that. And it took us a while to figure out how to use it. And I'm sure a lot of the gallery artists still can't see the show, because, so I said, just keep trying, close it down, start again, So that's one thing. And also on the website, we try to show all the art individually in a, almost like instead of doing a postcard now. And that's something I'm still debating about. I'm thinking we should still do the cards because people do like to have something to put on their refrigerator, and it's a good reminder. And so I'm thinking that we'll still go back and do some cards for some of the shows that don't have them. And I'm trying to think, the other thing, online exhibits. We're having online exhibits every month, every 3 weeks. And in a way, we can do more than one. I have a group of Japanese artists who want to show in March, and I still want to do another Her Story show, but since they're online, let's do them both.
Right. Yeah, it's like, it's not like you don't have the space, right?
Right. It's just mental space.
Right, mental space, right. Yeah, we use that 3D program at the Arts Council, and it's amazing. You can go in there and see the entire show. It was funny because I went to and looked at the 3D version of it online, and then I went into the space, and I'm like, boy, this work looks really familiar. And I'm like, oh, that's right, I've already seen this show.
Yeah. Well, and I saw one of the high-end galleries' websites had like 4 digital shows on in 3D galleries, but each gallery was different. So I don't know what program that is. I want to check that one out because it must be their space visualized, not just an anonymous space of art.
Wow.
So
yeah.
if I find out, I'll let you know.
Yeah, definitely. That's intriguing. Like you can kind of drop in art, like have a matrix kind of built of your gallery and then just drop it in.
Exactly.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me know if you find out what that is.
And then the other thing I'm trying to do, and I just still haven't found, I may decide to just have the gallery invest more in it because this is what we need to spend our money on now. But I also want to do videos, like, studio visits and like this, interviews with artists. But in their studio if possible. So
yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, that's one thing, especially, having you being able to interview you, someone from New York City. I mean, to try to bring people to Cape Girardeau is really, it's very difficult.
I'm looking forward to coming.
I know. Well, you have a like, I don't know, you have a foot down here. Really, you have a connection to Cape. So but yeah, I mean, I'm doing other interviews too with people from New York and all over the place too, which I never would have been able to do. So I'm really happy about that aspect of it. I mean, you gotta find goodness in everything, I guess. But
exactly.
I would rather, be able to hang out with you in person.
And I could do a performance,
Yeah, right. Well, in the future, we'll do something.
We'll do it again.
So here is, you're talking about the artists that you have in your gallery space. So as an active participant in the New York art scene, which artists working now most excite you?
Wow. I thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
Because, I thought, oh no, I can't say any Viridian artists because if I say one, I've got to say them all. So, okay, I put them on the list, first of all. But, I was thinking back about what got me started. Initially, when I was at Ohio U, Marisol, who's no longer alive, sadly, I saw her work actually in a glamour photo shoot of fashion clothing, and they were using her sculptures as backdrops or as partners to the model.
Wow.
And that I thought, wow, I gotta go. And I actually got to know her because she lived not far from me, and we used to drink at the same bar, But she was quite something. And then Claus Oldenburg was who, his art got me started making my soft sculpture initially, because I thought, hey, women's skills. And a lot of feminists began to use women's techniques, sewing, and a lot of the performance comes out of women's lives. And then men began to take it over. That freed men also to sew in their art. So this was another aspect, I think, of feminist art that was really important and really influenced how art has evolved over the decades. So I'm glad I remembered to say that, because I think it's important. In terms of art, okay, artists. I like bizarre art. Oh, I shouldn't say bizarre art, but okay, a painter that I love is Helen Frankenthaler. It's so beautiful. I love the spreading of the color, and I love Kiki Smith. And then neither of them are conventional artists. I love Ed Ruscha with his words. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mona Hatoum. Mm-hmm. She's a Palestinian artist. And curiously, she once applied to Soho 20 and they rejected her.
Really?
I brought her to the gallery and they said, I don't know why they were afraid. I don't know.
She was doing those hair pieces. I remember the hair pieces. And then didn't she do a piece where an internal kind of view of her stomach or something like that was?
Oh, wow. See, I'm more conscious of the furniture, like the bed with the nails and carpets, that were very dangerous to walk on.
Right.
Those kind of works. But it's all so powerful.
Those are great examples too, because they're all women artists, but their aesthetic is so different from each other,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another woman artist I love is Sophie Calle. I'm not so interested in the photographs. I just love the idea of what she does, of like seeing a man and deciding to pretend he's her lover, and maybe like practically, tracking him and haunting him. You've done a lot of strange pieces like that involve real life situations and fantasies and imaginings.
Yeah, creating narratives. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. And Marlene Dumas, South African, I think her painting is very, very moving and sensitive stuff. Let's see, the guys, Amstel Kiefer.
Oh yeah.
All that dirt and wood. Yeah. And Jimmy Durham.
Okay. Oh, interesting. All right.
And I saw a show of Jimmy Durham like back in the 70s when he was just starting. And in fact, he had an office. When I was running Artist Talking Art, we had this office down in some city building, and he had one there too. I don't know what he was doing in it, but I would see him a lot. And he did a show, and they had skulls and feathers. It was very Native American. And he was selling things for like $9, $20. And I thought, wow. And unfortunately, all the ones I could afford were bought by the time I saw the show. but he's supposedly, I think, one of the top 100 artists now. So, oh, and David Hammonds. David Hammonds is another one.
Wow, so eclectic in your aesthetic. I mean, I'm picturing all this work, and it's like, wow, these are all very different from each other. So, and it's, I think that's a, I was going to say, I think that's a great skill to have as a gallery director, though, to be able to enjoy and appreciate all these different, you know, processes and ways of making art. I think that's really interesting.
Well, and that's something I want to do during this time when we have to have these online shows, is I'm going to try to gather small groups of the Viridian artists whose work is similar, or, you know, contrast it with others, and explore all the differences. Yeah. I think a lot of these people that I like so much, it has to do with the fact that their art comes so much out of reality, and also their imaginings about the reality and their twists that they take reality into, you know.
I've seen several of the shows in person at Viridian, and I get that, you know, that idea. You really have, it's a cohesiveness because of the eclectic nature, if that makes any sense.
And it's all good art.
Yeah, it is. I mean, they're really great shows, and very talented people that you have to choose from, which I think is remarkable in many ways. First, that they are, you know, they want to be part of that environment, and secondly, because you have an eye that you are, you know, that you are able to, you know, include so many different, like I said, aesthetics and processes and these individuals. So,
well, and you know, another aspect of our shows is that we hang them very, very carefully and very, you know, it's like a collage as far as I'm concerned, or an assemblage. And so, you know, that hanging day, you know, we start out, we unpack everything, we lean it up against the wall, and then we have lunch. You know?
Yeah, fresh eye.
Yeah,
no, that makes sense.
So,
okay, we're going to get into some of your work now. Let's talk about you as an artist. So recently, I did a lot of research on you, by the way, looking back into, you know, not even looking back, but this is recent things that are happening. So recently, your piece Shadow was selected by art historian David Cohen for the exhibition Pets of the Pandemic at Alpha 137 Gallery. And I love this part. 50% of the proceeds of sales from this show go to Best Friends Animal Society, an organization that has always been part of my family. Actually, we've given money to them. My father and my sister went out there and worked there in Utah at the actual place. So anyway, enough about me. This is about you. The piece that is in this exhibition is accompanied by the poem Pandemic Poem Number 4, version poem. So I was wondering if you could read the poem for us and then offer some insight into its meaning. Do you have it there?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, great.
All right. My cat is my only companion as I kill time and negative thoughts in this pandemic of the moment. Sheltering in place, I confess there are 2 cats, but the one sits by himself somewhere else. This one sits with me in the sunlight. The sun feels otherworldly. Everything is different, as if it's coming from outside worlds, but reality, just outside the window. Memories and almost philosophical koans proliferate my brain. When I was in New York, the first 5 months, basically I was in the studio with my 2 cats, and I'm on Canal Street, we would sit at the window and just look out at life. And there were Black Lives Matter protests going by. It was quite something. The Sheraton Hotel is across the street, and a lot of the workers would be trucked or bused there and stay there overnight, and they'd come out in the morning to go back to work. So it's really, just that kind of being alone, and the kind of, just trying to look at reality in a calm way is, I guess, what that poem is trying to evoke. And the feelings that I'm sure a lot of people had about just the otherworldliness of this moment in time. It's continues to be unbelievable.
Yeah, most certainly. When I read this, living in New York is can be very chaotic, obviously. But to me, this poem is very quiet. And so it kind of shows that almost this disconnect with the city itself because of this pandemic, where you are unable to participate in the energy that is New York City because you have to shelter in place. And so it was, in a way, it's poignant, but it's also kind of sad. Especially, I don't know, because I live there and I understand that there's this need to always be part of the city as a character. I mean, it's not just a city, it's part of who you are when you're living there, and not to be able to interact with that character.
And that's part of why we're there, So many of us New Yorkers are from other places, and we came there because we dreamed about it, We wanted to be there. It's a place to be. You can be totally alone, or you can go out and find whoever you need to find to spend time with. And there's always a restaurant, there's always a bar, there's always some place to go, even if it's just walking the street. And the city is quite safe now. You can roam. You don't go into Central Park, maybe in the night, but other than that, it's pretty safe. And window shopping, all of it,
Yeah, but not now. That's the thing.
Nope,
yeah.
Nope. And I'm just longing to eat out. I want to eat out so badly. I'm so tired of cooking.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, that I think that is, I don't know, it really said a lot. And I think a lot of people can, get, something or feel something that they are feeling within this poem. So your piece, back to your work again, your piece, Endless Junk Mail Scroll and Other Transformational Works, is currently on display in the gallery at Catapult Creative House. This piece has been described by critic Ed McCormick as, quote, a defining career-crowning achievement, encapsulating the philosophy of aesthetic ecology that prompted her to found the Art from Detritus movement, end quote. Would you talk about how this piece came into being and how you see it progressing in the future?
Wow. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about that, because I thought, how much longer can I do this? And I have still boxes and boxes of junk mail that I've saved. And initially, when I began it, what attracted me to doing it actually came from my mother, who used to write on envelopes, right? The grocery list or notes of things to do or things that she had to tell me. And saving envelopes was the first thing I began doing. And it was the ones with the textured insides that became the basis of the scroll. And then I would collage on that and put paint on it and do all kinds of things. But now junk mail has changed. And at that time, I hated junk mail. And it's a bother. It's a nuisance. It fills your mailbox with useless stuff wanting you to spend your money. But now, this year, it's all been political. So I've saved this, and I wanted to show one in one of our pandemic shows at Viridian. I still haven't figured out how to present it exactly, because it's the contents now that matter. So I'm not sure quite where I'm gonna go with it. I also did some research on scrolls, Japanese and Chinese scrolls, and how some of them are intended to be narratives. And you have a section that's open, and then you roll it up and you open and look at the next section. Some of them lay on tables, some of them are on walls. And so I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. I love collaging, and I love paper, and I love fashion magazines. You know, I mean, so maybe I can combine it with my anger at how they're featuring all these beautiful young women and ignoring us older women with character, and somehow combine that with the political messages of the day, which are numerous, and I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Kind of, I don't know, piggybacking on what you're saying, it's interesting. You're talking about the envelopes and your mom writing on the envelopes. So there's materiality I know is really important to you. So that those materials, the kind of paper that was used to make those envelopes, the glue for the flap, all of that has really, I think, changed, and things have become slick. I mean, even the papers that are used, they're these slick, multicolored flyers that you get. I mean, I don't know how much they spend on these things, but it's crazy. So I'm wondering, have you noticed that kind of transition as you've been working on this over the years, just between the materials that this junk mail is made out of?
I guess I've thrown away those parts, because I
Okay.
didn't like them. I preferred that, my favorite are from the banks, and from the credit cards, because it's solid paper and it's got a nice kind of soft surface.
Right. Yeah, because you can't, it's hard to draw or paint on that slick,
Exactly.
that kind
You
of clay
can't.
surface. Yeah, interesting. So you're actually picking and choosing then the junk mail that you're using based on the materiality of it and how it feels.
Yeah.
How it makes sense to you.
Yeah, it wasn't the message. Occasionally I'd take one of the large 0% signs and stick it in there.
Yeah.
And but I guess I felt nervous about identifying who was sending these, because actually years ago I had once made this, one of my first sewn artworks was a box of 64 crayons, and I approached Crayola and they were, oh no, we're not at all interested in this,
Yeah.
And I had mistakenly silk screened the name Crayola on them.
Oh no.
Although actually someone wants it for their collection now, so we'll see. But
Right.
A lot of people made those crayons themselves, those crayon-shaped cushions after that. So I figure I influence people at least for their home decor.
You
Even
see
if they
those?
didn't invest in mine.
Well, you see those in kids' rooms all the time.
Yeah.
Those big pillows. Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
Well, mine were 1970.
You need a little copyright on there, right?
Exactly.
Well, I only have one more question for you. I guess, and this is for the audience too. So what advice would you give to young artists who want to make a political statement with their work? Women, men, whoever, because there's so much to say, I think we're to a point where younger folks are really are more aware of politics and ecology and things that are happening. The last 20 years or so, I think, has been really a transformation. So I was wondering if you have any advice, all the things you've done.
I guess it would be, don't preach, because then it becomes a poster. You don't want it to be a poster. You want it to remain art and to be able to say something in a way, I don't know, maybe that shows what's happening or what's being destroyed, but somehow more intuitively, but courageously. I think in general, we fail most when we don't have the courage to keep going and not, we have to say what we need to say, to not think about, oh, what do they want to hear? Because that totally corrupts your art and it turns it into a commodity. You have to have, your soul has to be in it, the things that matter to you. But I think it has to be, said in a way that is your way somehow. I don't know if I'm being very clear.
No, I think I think the idea of authenticity. So you have to be an authentic artist, not, like you said, not trying to put out a message that isn't your own.
Right.
I'm angry about this, but you know what? This might be better for this gallery space. So, okay, well, maybe you can always tell when art isn't authentic.
Exactly.
I mean, there's something missing from it. And I think that's, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what it sounds like to me, that you have to be true to yourself too.
Well, and it's funny. I once did a show at a local bar, and they were great. They gave a case of champagne for our reception, and I did my price list like a menu, with appetizers, the main course, and the art I called dessert was the art that was less from my heart in a way. I was trying to please them.
Mm-hmm.
It
was too sweet.
It was too sweet. Exactly. Yeah. I guess, yeah.
Well, is there anything else you want to say to our students and faculty and people in the audience? Any words of wisdom?
Words of wisdom, my goodness. I don't have any words of wisdom. I don't know, try to upcycle your trash, make it into art, see the beauty in it. I've been doing a lot of reading of my books that because how you collect books and you don't have time to read them. Well, now we have lots of time. And I was reading some Danto essays from The Nation that he collected. I think it was something, Recognitions. I can't remember the title of the collection now, but he was just talking about, he was contrasting people like Joseph Cornell with his little objects, and how Cornell's objects were so precious to him. Each little object was very, very precious, and he was contrasting it with someone who would, I don't know, combine it in a different way or regard it in a less personal way. I've lost half the thought, so
Yeah, Cornell was a character. I mean, he never went anywhere, but he seemed to be very worldly in the pieces that he made. It was a really interesting guy.
He was listening and watching.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview. We're so happy to have you, and hopefully in the future we'll see you in person. That would be great.
Yeah. And you too, come back to New York anytime. I have a guest room in the other end of my studio.
Well, as soon as I have my vaccination, I'll be on a plane.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I'm getting mine on Monday.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah. Moving forward, right?
Yep. Cross our fingers that it works and that we get the second one. And there are a lot of people who don't believe in it.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I know.
We're going to be wearing our masks for a long time.
At least probably the next year. This is what I'm understanding. Yeah.
And we still won't be going to restaurants that much.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to end this on a negative note. So thank you so much, Vernita, for joining us today.
I'm writing a lot for myself.
No, that's okay. All right, so I'll probably cut it right there.
Okay.
I thought that was great.
I did too. Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was wonderful. I like, I have these questions when I do these interviews, but I like the segues too are interesting as well. Where you kind of go off topic a little bit.
Well, when I first saw your questions, I panicked because I thought, wait a second, what did we do? And then I decided to just calm down. And actually, then I started to look up art workers. And, and then it reminded me of all the things that we had done. And, it's just it's amazing the value of art, It's so critically important. And I don't know what kind of art is going to come out now from this, because some of us are kind of frozen
Mhm.
in our work. And then other times you feel like you have to escape to it. And so you go off and do something totally out of keeping with your own work, but it helps,
Yeah, well, it's therapy. It's cathartic, because otherwise, where does that energy go? I mean,
Yeah,
you have to
exactly.
get rid of that energy.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, do you know Chris Leone by any chance? He was
No.
he was part of, I'll give you context that might help. He was part of the group of guys in the 80s who started ACT UP.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, he was part of remember the poster?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the silence equals death poster. He he's a friend of mine and my husband, actually. So he's going to be doing one of these
Oh,
talks
wonderful.
too. Yeah, from New York. Oh no, I think they live in Pennsylvania now. But anyway, so I was wondering if you happen to maybe cross paths with him at some point. But yeah, I'm excited about that too. I'll send you that uh,
Yeah.
interview.
I want to see them all.
Okay. Yeah, there's 4 of them in the series. So yeah, I think we'll have one that's going to be face to face, because he's a professor. He's an
Okay.
expert on the 60s. But I'm going to Zoom it, so there'll be a recording of it. So I'll
And
send all of them.
who's the fourth one?
Do you remember? I don't know if you met Hannah Sanders. She's our printmaking instructor. She's teaching a printmaking class called Art and Activism this semester. So it's going to be her and her students and what they make in that class. So that'll be a good one. I'll film that one. They'll all be filmed, so I'll send them all to you.
And it's so important what you're doing in this time, especially because I think people are, there's been a lot of talk in the Times and on the news about, why do we worry about art in times like this when people are starving? And yet this is what keeps us going. The plays, the music. It's so critically important. And these are the people who also are starving now, some of them, because they don't have work.
Exactly. I can't imagine what Broadway is like. I mean, all those people.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I mean, and you don't hear about it. You don't hear about what's happening with them. I mean, I know they have grants and so on, but they don't have much. No.
And it's only the big ones. I mean, and even some of those big institutions that have so much money are going down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What about the off Broadway places?
Yeah. They just try to keep paying the rent to hold on to the space, and landlords are having problems too. They're going out of business. The money grubbers.
Yep. Oh yeah. Well, it's the trickle up, trickle down.
Yeah. It's gonna change the world. That's for sure.
I was glad to see that New York is starting to turn on Trump, which is good.
Yeah, exactly. And Cuomo sent 1,000 National Guard theoretically to Washington. Good. That was amazing. How that went down.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
So
let's see what happens with the Senate. See if he gets truly impeached or not. But yeah.
So all we can do is cross our fingers, hold our breath, and I guess have a glass of wine.
Yeah, or several.
I'm drinking sake now.
Oh, well, that's good. That's a kick.
Yeah. Every night I have my sake at 5:00 and I talk to the president of my board. And
nice.
I listen to him complain and